Chapter 7. Leo Kelly. In his suburban Maryland home, Agent Leo Kelly monitored the network's coverage of the chemical attack on the wall screen as he paid much closer attention to the notebook computer that he held in his lap. Eva Marie Taffy would have been national news had it not been for the chemical attacks in Waller County. As the exurban Texas tragedy unfolded, Ms. Taffy was compiling enough votes to become the fledgling Eclectic Party's gubernatorial candidate in Mississippi. Leo Kelly was intrigued. Leo Kelly was still officially employed by the DEA and planned to stay employed until his pension kicked in. He planned to work thereafter at a more lucrative position as a private contractor to the Drug Enforcement Administration. Ostensibly, Leo Kelly worked as a contract coordinator, but unofficially, he worked on the enemies list. The administration would never admit that such a program ever existed. There was no such thing as an enemies list. There were bad guys, of course. Those were the people DEA imprisoned. But there was no such thing as an official enemies list. No sirree. Leo Kelly was a close friend of a founder of the first enemies list, Walter McVeigh, a fellow Notre Dame alumnus. Agent McVeigh had retired as soon as he was pension eligible, and he started a successful government vendor agency that specialized in contracts with his former employer. In the shadows within shadows of covert law enforcement, Kelly and McVeigh pruned the enemies list. There was a time when 100% of the news media were pro-law enforcement. Then came the internet, and small, furry mammals competed with the old, monstrous dinosaurs. The parvenu rodents did not devour the thunder lizards, but they did siphon off some of the market share. Recognizing the impact of the newfound pestilence, Project Enemies List was initiated. The project flew the flag of government when it was advantageous and flew the flag of private enterprise when it was convenient. But usually it flew no flag at all. It was off the books, off the radar, off the record. Aside from the administrators, the project recruited, or perhaps coerced, agents who had run afoul of agency policy and preferably had violated the law. Should the manure strike the rotating blade, the agent involved would have no credibility. Yes, I should have allowed him to face prosecution years ago, but I took mercy on him because he had a family, because he and I worshiped together, because he had once saved my life, or whatever story happened to fit. The project also diverted civilian offenders who possessed advanced computer skills. Leo Kelly had overseeing bad things happening to the enemies. The cheapest method of control was to plant kiddie porn on their computers. But the project didn't want to overdo that trick for fear of wrecking the plausibility. A lot of enemies received illicit packages in the mail from overseas. Others, who resided in jurisdictions where internet gambling was still illegal, were caught gambling. They always lost on the internet with funds they didn't even know they possessed. Kelly and McVeigh had retired a lot of enemies. But Leo Kelly sensed America, and the world for that matter, changing too fast for his comfort. In media and politics, new players emerged who had no loyalty to or respect for the law enforcement industry. A couple of media T-Rex had been purchased by undesirables. There was a new political party that was starting to gain steam. At the center of the cyclone was the Joseph family, and the Joseph family's first viable candidate for a major political office was Eva Marie Taffy. Leo Kelly sorted through his eclectic party file in one window as the webcast yammered away in another. The Eclectic Party was formed 7 years ago by John Joseph and his cronies. The idea was to unite the Greens, the Libertarians, the Constitutionists, the Pro-Life Party, the PETA Party, and an assortment of other upstarts under one big tent. Whatever differences they might have between them, the respective parties recognized that it was politically wiser to publicly argue their differences than to privately sit in silence. Over time, the original eccentrics, as they were called, were displaced by retreads and has-beens and refugees from the two major political parties. Joseph had appointed the party's first national committee president, a 24-year-old wunderkind named Martin de Vries. De Vries immediately recruited Richard Bloom, a third-generation Wall Streeter with assets in the billions, presidential aspirations, and an ego bigger than the Chrysler Building, to run for governor of Connecticut. Bloom had considered buying the Democratic or Republican gubernatorial nomination in either New York or New Jersey, but de Vries had reminded Bloom that other fat cats coveted those stepping stones to the White House. The nutmeg state would be easier to buy, and with so many votes being split between the Democrat and the Republican, he would only have to get 37% of the vote to win. Thus was coined the 37% solution. Bloom would spend $72 million to garner 40% of the vote, and he claimed the prize of 4 years lodging at the governor's mansion in Hartford. Other White House hopefuls followed Bloom's example, and within 6 years, 5 states had elected Eclectic Party governors. They had also claimed 2 Senate seats and 1 congressional seat. Interestingly, none of these opportunists were political allies of the Joseph family. He had formed what was curiously called the progressive wing of the Eclectic Party, and they might as well be Charlie Brown's baseball team. But the dim and the wise alike both suspected that Joseph was fattening up the goose to make for a tastier feast. He was letting someone else blaze the trail and pave the road just in time for him to wheel his Bentley out of the showroom. Now, in the party's 8th year, the progressive wing was running viable candidates who were well-funded and well-coached. They were advocates of smaller government. They wanted to legalize, not decriminalize, all drugs. Their most high-profile candidate was a diminutive black woman named Eva Marie Taffy. Leo Kelly paid close attention as she took the podium at the Radisson for her victory speech. "Mississippi is a beacon of hope," Taffy shouted, ensuring that her first sentence would make a good soundbite. "Mississippi will be a beacon of freedom." Cheering ensued. "Mississippi shall be a cradle of prosperity." More cheers. "Mississippi will reject bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake." Mild cheering. "Mississippi will reject regulation for regulation's sake." Scant applause. "Mississippi will reject tax for tax's sake." The crowd drowned her out and started the Taffy chant. Leo Kelly was one of the 7,269 viewers at the Joseph-owned freedomisgood.com. He probably wasn't the only one taking notes. Suddenly his cell phone rang the Notre Dame fight song. "Yes," he used his own voice. "I think I know where you'll be spending your time after Operation Windfall," Walter McVeigh said, using a Ronald Reagan voice emulator. "Mississippi is hot," Leo Kelly intoned, "and Mississippi sizzling." "Mississippi sizzling, Mr. President." They chuckled and they chuckled again as the emulator had difficulty with Ronald Reagan's laugh. For all of its wonder and speech duplication, this robot laughed like a robot. "You are a hoot, Mr. President." Leo Kelly terminated the call and looked at the clock on the cell. 10:07. "I had better check on Olson," he stated as he dialed the number listed under "dumbass."